Welcome to another episode of Marlins Monday. My name is Eric Wiedeke. It is Monday, June 30th, 2025, and we have a lot to talk about. The Marlins winning 7 straight this past week, 9 straight on the road, sweeping a West Coast or a road trip for the first time in club history, and it's a lot to talk about. But firstly, I do just want to shout out the 5 Reasons Sports Network in general. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Lots of stuff going on in South Florida sports. We've got NBA free agency kicking off this evening. The Miami Dolphins making a huge trade, sending Jalen Ramsey over to Pittsburgh for Minkah Fitzpatrick, as well as sending Jonnu Smith for draft compensation. This is also a good plug for Scouting the Fins, which will be coming out later on this week. I'm sure we will be discussing the Jalen Ramsey for Minkah Fitzpatrick swap and what that could mean for the Dolphins defense moving forward. Also covering the Panthers as they try to retain Brad Marchand and Aaron Ekblad beyond Sam Bennett, who signed this past week. But I do just want to get into the Marlins here. It's 7 in a row, besting Atlanta, and then going on the road and beating the Giants and the Diamondbacks, who both of which were over 500 going into the series with the Marlins. And it's been a really interesting run here of late as they've won 13 now of their last 18 games, 13-5 since early June here for the Marlins, back over 500 for the month. And I mean, it's been just a little bit of everything. The lineup has been extremely consistent for this ball club. Clayton McCullough seems to have found a group that he likes. The Marlins have also been healthy. You know, they had missed Dane Myers for a short time this year. They had missed Otto Lopez for a short time this year. They had missed Xavier Edwards for a short time this year. So there have been a multitude of factors as to why the Marlins struggled as much as they did to start the season. Sandy Alcantara getting off to a god-awful start this year, got roughed up against Arizona, but still did well to get them 6 innings and keep them in that game long enough for them to kind of just answer back and do what they've been doing all road trip long, which is fighting with this ball club. And you know, there's so many players you could highlight right now. You could highlight Otto Lopez, who for my money has been the hottest player in baseball over the last week and a half. You can highlight Kyle Stowers, who's returned to all-star form. You can highlight Augustin Ramirez, who once again is putting himself back in front runner conversations for Rookie of the Year in the National League. It's a lot of really encouraging things happening right now for the Marlins. The bullpen has been lights out. Guys like Anthony Bender and Ronnie Enriquez, Lake Bakar has been great over the last few weeks. What they're getting from the likes of guys like Valente Belloso. It's been a total ensemble kind of production here for the Fish. You've got Cal Quantrill giving them decent starts, 3.88 ERA over his last 9, 401 FIP. So he's been just a kind of a steady 4 to 5 inning guy at the end of your rotation, which I think is really all you can ask for out of a guy like that. And then on top of that, I just think that the consistency that they've been getting with this lineup of late has paid off with, you know, huge dividends for this Marlins ball club to be in a position now where you've got a lineup that you're repeating night after night and you're getting results with it. And it's going to create a really interesting conversation for the Marlins going forward here, because they've got a lot of their younger players right now playing pretty good baseball, and it's going to make for some really interesting decisions here. The other thing that I will say is I don't think this changes whether or not they're buyers or sellers. I think Peter Bendix and the front office have a plan and a vision, and they're going to be disciplined in that. You know, the truth of the matter is this is still a team that's 7 games under 500. They're still better than 8 games out of the wild card. You know, I'm not going to go there just yet with this. If they you know, turn this into like a 14, 15 game win streak, then we can have those conversations. But until that happens, this is still a team that is going to be selling. But I think the interesting part of the conversation now is, what are they going to be selling? Because I think that, you know, during every rebuild, it kind of goes in phases. And the Marlins have done well to accumulate some of this young talent. They're the youngest team in baseball right now in terms of position players. And they've gotten to a point now where it's guys like Otto Lopez, and it's guys like Xavier Edwards, and it's guys like Dane Myers, and it's guys like Kyle Stowers, and it's guys like Augustin Ramirez, who are some of your best players, Liam Hicks, who are some of your best players right now. But naturally, that creates a situation where, not all of those guys are going to be part of your core moving forward, especially when you consider what you've got behind them. They're going to want to see Davison De Los Santos at some point. They're going to want to see Joe Mack at some point. Griffin Conine is right around the corner, is going to be back next year. Granted, he doesn't have a guaranteed roster spot, but I think he's going to get a look. And so the Marlins are kind of at a crossroads here where I think really the next 6 months of how they manage this roster is going to determine what the ceiling for this team is over the next 6 to 12 months. I think the goal right now should be maximizing your returns for either Sandy or Cabrera or both. And I don't think it needs to be the case that, you're just getting position players in those deals, because I like where they're at with their catcher spot long term. I like where they're at with their shortstop and Otto Lopez at the moment. I think you're looking at a situation where they're going to have to make really difficult decisions. Is Dane Myers part of the long-term future? Is Connor Norby part of the long-term future? Is Xavier Edwards? Like, these are guys that they have to make decisions on. Is Liam Hicks part of the long-term future? And so I think you're looking at a situation now where it's, okay, we have to tread carefully, because we believe that we have good prospects behind these guys in some spots, but it's one of those situations where a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush potentially. Do you trade away a Dane Myers because you believe in the long-term potential of either somebody that's in the organization right now, or somebody that you're going to draft, or somebody that you're going to get in a potential Sandy or Cabrera trade? Do you move on from Liam Hicks because you fail to see a position for him long term, with a guy like De Los Santos projected at first base and a guy like Mack projected at catcher, along with Augustin Ramirez? And so these are decisions that they're going to have to make. Ronnie Enriquez, I think, is safe over the course of the next 5-6 years, but you're going to be looking at, okay, well, Anthony Bender, Edward Cabrera. I mean, listen, he's been really good over the last 8-9 starts. And as much as we talk about how much depth that they have in terms of pitching in the minors, it does run thin when you have guys like Meyer and Garrett and Weathers all on the shelf. And then you're going to deal Sandy and Cabrera potentially on top of that. You're really testing your organizational depth. And I know that they've got a wealth of starting pitchers, but a good portion of those guys are at the lower levels. And so they have to determine and make the evaluation of how comfortable they are moving on from, two of your starters at this point, after trading Jesus Luzardo for Starlin Caba in what I think is probably the worst move thus far of the Bendix era. I think he's largely done a lot of good to this point, but I think that one was one that you can clearly say, yeah, that's a pretty egregious miss. And then, your bullpen, I think that they do a pretty good job of just being able to, flip bullpen guys every year. I'm not concerned about that long term for them. I think that they'll be able to continue to build a bullpen. Uh, but if you're Peter Bendix, this is your most critical time of the build, because I looked at this team going into this season and I said, you know what, this could be a really fun Marlins team. This could be a team that maybe makes a case to win 70, 72 games, anchored by some really nice young talent, and kind of in a similar mold to the 2006 2007 Marlins, where it was Hanley, it was Dan Ugla, it was Josh Willingham, it was Mike Jacobs, it was Jeremy Armida. It was a bunch of young guys kind of making things shake for that team. And I think that this is a team where you've got a lot of the same things happening. Granted, the pitching, at least at the big league level, isn't quite to that same depth that they had in those seasons, but you've got a Robbie Snelling waiting in the wings. You've got an Adam Mazer, who I think could be a decent piece in the back end of the rotation. You've got Braxton Garrett returning from injury. You've got Ryan Weathers still on the mend. You've got Yuri Perez, who I think he'll be fine. Yeah, ultimately, I'm not super concerned with Perez. I think he'll be fine moving forward. The control issues don't move me with him. I'm not worried about it whatsoever. Uh, the only thing that I think you have to be concerned about is injuries with guys like Meyer, like Weathers. Your Thomas White at this point, I think is going to I think he's going to force their hand a lot quicker than people realize at the double A level. He went 5 scoreless yesterday in his second start for Pensacola, and I think you're going to see a lot more of that out of Thomas White. And if he pitches really well from, let's say, here on through August, the end of his season at double A, I don't really see what the justification is for saying, yeah, well, we need to shelve him until September 26th. Because I think at that point, I would kind of view him as a guy that maybe he starts 2026 at AAA. Maybe he's up by May of 26. Might be rushing the young man, but I mean, you give players what they show they're ready to take. And I think Thomas White is a prime example of a guy that's shown that he can handle more than what he's been given so far. Granted, 2 starts in at double A, we'll see how that progresses. If he hits a road bump or some kind of struggles, we'll reevaluate at that point. But right now, if he does continue to pitch the way that he's pitching at double A, then I don't really think there's a reason to set a hard and fast kind of obstacle in his way in terms of how fast he can progress through the organization. There's just not a reason for it. The other thing that I do want to touch on is Clayton McCullough, because I kind of unloaded last week on McCullough a little bit. And I got to give him some credit. I think the lineup decisions have been a lot better. There's been consistency in the order at this point. Getting thrown out versus the Giants in the last game of that series was the absolute right thing to do. The Giants throwing at Otto Lopez was Bush League, and it was immature. They had been crying all series over getting hit, 3 times the day before, 2 of which on pitches that were, not even close to intentional. It was very clear that it wasn't close to intentional. Your closers in the game, you're trying to close out a game, and you're going to hit the first 2 guys you see? Okay, sure, whatever. But I just think it can't be overstated right now the way that this ball club is playing. They've got another tough series, or a set of series upcoming. It's going to be Minnesota at home, and then it's going to be Milwaukee at home. It's not going to get much easier for the Marlins. But the way that they're playing right now, with the production that they're getting from some of their guys, I think it was kind of a foregone conclusion about a week ago that the Marlins All-Star was going to be either Kyle Stowers or either Kyle Stowers or Anthony Bender. And I think that it's still a good possibility that it's either of those two. But I think now you've got a pretty good case for Augustine Ramirez. And if you're just going off of just WAR, Otto Lopez has the best case out of anybody on the team because he's giving you top 5 at the position caliber defense. He's giving you a guy that can steal 20 bags a year. He's giving you a guy that can hit 20 homers a year. And he's driving in runs at just an insane clip. That might be the biggest kind of boon of the Bendix era is the Otto Lopez decision. And I know that we've talked about him being a trade target, and I'm sure teams are going to call and ask, but I'm not so certain the Marlins should be answering those calls or entertaining those conversations seriously unless you're receiving a compensation package that is worthy of a starting caliber shortstop with years of team control, because that might be what you're looking at with Otto Lopez. The underlying numbers love him. The expected K rate, overall exit velocity is improving. And that's the thing with Otto is if he starts giving you above average offensive production combined with what he's giving you defensively and what he can provide you on the bases, then you're looking at a guy that can be your starting shortstop for the next 5 to 8 years. And I think you would be completely fine with that. So, this is probably a little bit more of a introspective tone than I think a lot of people thought would be taken in the wake of winning 7 straight for the Marlins. And I think it's fantastic. I mean, this is the most fun I've had watching the Marlins, and I couldn't tell you how long. I mean, I think this is personally, to me at least, more fun than the 23 team that made the playoffs. Because I think with the 23 team, there was kind of that sinking suspicion of, okay, well, it's Josh Bell, it's Jorge Soler, it's Jake Berger. These guys are veterans. I don't really know how long they're going to be around. But right now, what you've got with these guys playing well is you've got guys that can be, franchise cornerstones for the next 5 to 10 years in guys like Stowers and Ramirez and potentially Lopez. We'll see. He still has to earn that. And then you think of what they have waiting in the wings and what they could potentially get back at the deadline if they're able to correctly identify who the core is and they make good deals at this deadline. This is a team that could be setting itself up for success, number one, sooner than anticipated in 2026, but for the next 4, 5, 6 years. I mean, this is where a window gets created for contention, and they're on the verge of that. I mean, and maybe that's hyperbolic to say at this point, but I think when you look at who on the team is performing right now, if it was Eric Wagaman and Jesus Sanchez and Nick Fortes carrying them to this win streak, I might be a little bit more concerned that it's not as sustainable because those guys, you don't really view them as long-term pieces on this team. But it's Kyle Stowers and it's Augustine Ramirez and it's Otto Lopez and it's Xavier Edwards, who has been better. He's slumped a little bit recently, but he's been better in aggregate. And so it's a lot of fun to see a team that's really young, that's having a lot of fun themselves on the field. You can just tell these guys are really enjoying the heck out of playing baseball right now. And it's contagious. This is a fun ball club, and they remind me. I'm not going to say it, but my point is, the last thing that I want to get across, because I've talked enough about this being, I think an important part of the rebuild and what they're going to be moving forward, and I've talked enough about the on-field stuff. This last part is kind of a, this is mostly a message to the fan base. This is the brightest future the club has had in a long time. If you look at just the young players who are performing on this team and what's upcoming down the pipe in the minor league system, and they're playing a really fun brand of baseball right now, head out to the ballpark. Show people, that baseball in Miami is something that's going to be able to work. I personally believe that it will, because I think if you look at what happened with the Panthers over the last 4 or 5 years, it shows that if you have a dedication to winning, and if you actually prove from an organizational standpoint that you care, the fan base is going to invest and they're going to care. And I think that the Marlins, if they play their cards right, not that they're going to win, multiple World Series in a row, they're in a position where they can be in contention for the next, from 2026 to 2032, 5-6 years of being a good ball club that's in contention for the playoffs, that can make a noise. And I need the fans to head out to the stadium or to Lone Depot, watch the guys play, root for this team. Number one, show the outside world that baseball can work in Miami. And number two, hopefully show the organization that, when it is time to invest, that investment will eventually be repaid, because they have put in work behind the scenes and the player development seems like it's working to this point. So Marlins starting a 3-game set tomorrow against the Twins, and then following that up with a weekend series against the Brewers on 4th of July weekend. I will see you next Monday with even more Marlins talk, hopefully after a 13-game winning streak. My name is Eric Wiedeke. You can follow me on X/Twitter at Eric Wiedeke. Once again, like, comment, and subscribe on the video. Also, make sure you are checking out the other content on the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel. South Florida sports is alive right now between the Jalen Ramsey trade, the Marlins winning 7 straight, the Panthers retaining Sam Bennett, Heat free agency starting up, and more. We will see you next time. Thanks so much, and have a great day. Bye-bye.